Hello and welcome to episode 20 of the Frame and Sequence podcast. My name is Todd Rittendaro, and in this episode I sit down with Oddur Thorisson. Oddur is a Torino-based photographer, writer, art director, gourmet, and lover of champagne, dogs, and especially his wife Mimi. I've admired Oddur's work for a very long time and had the pleasure of sitting down with him over lunch and champagne in Torino this last January. We talk about all things photography and how he approaches his work. We talk about how he collaborates with his wife Mimi on her various cookbooks and blog, how he approaches teaching photography. He also shares some thoughts on leading an aesthetic life, writing, some champagne recommendations, and of course his love of food, wine, and much, much more. This episode was a real treat for me, and I hope you enjoy the ambiance of the restaurant that we were in, as well as the conversation. I highly recommend pouring yourself a glass of champagne or mixing your favorite cocktail to go along with it. I hope you enjoy.
But I think that actually having some noises and having the food brought over could be fun.
I think so.
It's very me.
Yeah.
It's always more. Food is more important to me than photography.
Excellent. Nothing like starting a podcast with pouring of champagne.
Yes.
Grazie.
Cheers.
Thanks for doing this. Cheers to you.
My pleasure.
It wouldn't be fitting if we did not have champagne in front of us.
It would be more painful.
There's a lot I would love to ask you. I first found you through your photography and through Mimi's gorgeous cookbooks, which you shot all of, and including this new Italian one that's coming out. But you actually started off as a creative director, right?
Yes, and also thank you for finding me.
Yes.
Without that, I would be lost. People want to be found.
Exactly.
Yes. I didn't even start out as that. I started out as a law student.
Oh.
And then I realized that my idea of becoming a lawyer was actually not about law. It was about what the lifestyle of a lawyer, the suits they wear, the office they go to, the lunches, especially the lunches. And then I had a wake-up call that there was more to it.
Right.
And then I needed to find a more aesthetic outlet for my life's aspirations. And then I studied a bit of literature, went into journalism, worked in a magazine, became an editor of a big magazine in Iceland, but still very small.
Right.
And then landed in advertising as an art director.
Oh, okay.
Founded my own creative little kind of boutique agency, worked briefly abroad, came back, mainly for family reasons, and started taking pictures because I wanted to, because I was fascinated by photography, always have been very interested in magazines, and it was a process that kind of happened very organically.
Right.
In my family, my parents are academically educated, lawyer, economist, so whenever I brought up the subject of something artistic, that was always received with something like, that's really a good hobby to have. But I wasn't, I wasn't pushed anyway. It was just doesn't really feel like that was ever a career option. So that happened very organically.
Yeah.
Yes.
I know that at some point you started shooting for magazines as well. Was that?
Yeah, but what happened is that I was more on the graphic design and art direction and creative design.
Oh, okay.
And then taking a few campaigns here and there when I felt it was artistically interesting, or if I needed the money, maybe.
Yeah.
And then I met my wife, Mimi, in Paris, one night in Paris, which is a very sleazy story. We will not put that in here. But I immediately I just quit my job and I went to Paris, and it was easier to be a freelance photographer than a freelance art director.
Right.
So I started taking more pictures and taking more assignments that way, and it worked out very well for a while. Also, a lot of Icelandic clients in those days, which is when they had the fake kind of Icelandic boom. The budgets were American, but the money probably was all borrowed from somewhere. It was fun while it lasted.
Yeah.
And then one thing led to another. We moved to the countryside. We started doing more lifestyle and food-based things because of Mimi's interests,
Right.
Mimi's blog, cookbooks, and I started doing more. I had always been very interested in travel. I always shot a lot of travel for clients because I realized that I wasn't interested in staged photos.
Yeah.
There's nothing more boring in advertising than finding a guy who's a father and the mother, and they have to be very happy having cornflakes or makeup, or it's not something you can believe in and not something that you're interested in.
Right.
Here comes our antipasti. So That should probably be a picture too. We should document the.
Right.
No, I'm shooting this.
Wow, that is really good.
Very good. Where was I?
No, so you were talking about how you don't like staged photos, you much prefer
Yeah.
travel.
It just didn't feel anything interesting. It felt beautiful to travel. What is travel photography? Travel photography is a bit of everything.
Right.
It's a chance to discover a new place. It's trying to find the essence of that place, the aesthetic, and it's something that's interesting to people, but also appeals to my aesthetics. I admit that I always was pleasing myself first. I wasn't thinking this would be interesting for the reader. It was just that I find that beautiful. That's
Right.
what I'm going to shoot, regardless of the brief. And but it always became about every city is a little bit similar. It's got the kind of the more residential bourgeois area with the finer stores. Then it's got what used to be the kind of avant-garde area, but now that's become gentrified with
Right.
also some cool cafes and bars. And then there's the actual now hip area, which is a bit run down. So it's always like that, every city.
Yeah.
And so it's about kind of finding a way to tell that story through the most interesting, best dressed people, and best dressed not necessarily the finest or the most expensive, but the most interesting looking characters, the most photogenic restaurants, a bit of food, a little bit of emotion.
Right.
Maybe luck comes into it. I was once in Amsterdam having to shoot a story on Amsterdam, and I landed. It was pouring. It was 4 o'clock, and my flight out was in the morning, following morning at 5 o'clock.
Wow.
So I had 4 hours. So I was there with a film, with an M6 in a paper bag, trying to shoot, get something, and there's a bit of adrenaline involved because you feel like now I have about 1 or 2 hours of light.
Right.
I have nothing good. And then you start getting desperate, shooting tulips at least, having some tulips,
Exactly.
some herring, and then maybe if you're lucky, you see a man with a hat and like a boat behind him, and you feel like at least if I have that shot, I'm good. Now I can start filling in with other stuff. Maybe you get another break,
Right.
but that's very fun. So it's kind of like you're up to a point you're a master of your own fate, and up to a point it's up to luck to give you something.
Right.
But there's a lot of footwork involved.
No, absolutely. I mean, I also feel like your photography has a very distinct set of aesthetics. Were your set of aesthetics something that you've always just sort of naturally came out of your interest, or that you've sought out and refined in terms of even the way you dress or shoot or the things you decide to interact with?
Was never thought out. I think I really do appreciate dogs.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing I like about them is they don't think a lot.
Right.
They don't have a lot of hopes and aspirations. They just act on instinct.
That is true.
And I think it's more that. I think I don't wake up in a city thinking I want to try to find a guy in a navy blue pinstripe suit with a cigar. If he's there, that's great.
Right.
But if there's something else, it could be a child, it could be a guy on a bicycle, it could be some weird, it could be anything. So no, it's more about having the tools. And that's called experience, I think.
Yeah.
The more you shoot, in the end, you're always, when you've shot for a while, it becomes a little bit repetitive because you're often shooting the same picture again and again.
Right.
With different cast.
Yeah.
It's like staging a play that's already been performed many times, but
Right.
you put a little bit into it every time.
Yeah. I mean, those, you had recently posted some pictures on Instagram from your deep archives of when you lived in Paris, and they were so distinctly yours, and I love them, and they had this real timeless quality to them, but also a certain...
So distinctively mine because they were so bad.
Yeah, exactly. But no, I think in terms of like, maybe you have a very specific way of approaching composition, or even slightly some of the angles maybe you choose. I don't know. It has a real timeless filmic quality. Even
Well,
though
maybe I'm quite selective about what I would shoot.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't shoot something if I didn't like it. So yes, so my taste definitely comes into it.
Right.
And I think I also probably another thing I do is I've realized that's not on purpose, but I shoot everything straight on.
Oh.
Almost. I mean, there are exceptions,
Mm-hmm.
but I have a very strong inclination to shoot things straight on. So I've always thought that often when I've been fortunate enough to teach a few photography classes, And sometimes people think that taking a really good photo means that you have to have some weird angle to it.
Right.
And I don't necessarily see it as that. I think photography is, for me anyway, it's different things to different people, but for me it's definitely about light, that's for sure, and about what's in front of you, and then maybe how you approach what's in front of you, or maybe how you manipulate it. I think you have different types of photography. I'm very bossy.
Right.
If I'm on set, when I've shot my friend Matt Hranek, who's a photographer as well, he always gets a bit kind of startled. He said, like, would you be like that, like if you were shooting Clint Eastwood or George Clooney? Would you talk like that to them? And I probably would.
Right.
Because I have to. Because I just have to get... other people sit and wait more.
Right.
And I'm more just, I think it comes from working a lot with children and dogs. You can't wait for them to do what you want. They will never do what you want. You have to make it happen. So that's one thing. But I think... I lost the thread there, maybe.
I think
the food.
No, I'm really intrigued by the way that you see, and I guess, now that you say you shoot it head on, that's interesting. I wonder if that comes partly from your art director background as well, because sometimes maybe that's a more graphic
Yes,
way
that's
of
definitely
approaching it.
that.
Yeah.
That's a good point. And it's very insightful of you, Todd, I should have said that, but in a Hannibal Lecter kind of...
Yeah, exactly.
It's probably that. It's two-dimensional.
Right.
I just feel it that way a little bit. That's why, I do love paintings, and I love realist paintings. Sometimes people say, when you put something, say, on Instagram, that's just like a painting. They don't say that's just about my pictures. They say about a lot of stuff. I don't know. It's one kind of social media way of, I suppose, complimenting someone.
Right.
Although paintings can be very ugly, terrible. But I think it's the two-dimensional quality that I like to. So I limit myself a little bit, and I limit myself very much with equipment. I never go for the best equipment in a sense that it's never about the equipment. When I was living in Iceland, I'd go to this camera store. And there are guys who work in the camera store. They have more equipment than anybody could ever have, because that's their hobby.
Right.
But that's about the gear. And then they want to take a picture that looks like the picture in the Leica catalog or the Canon catalog that uses to the maximum the abilities of the latest feature.
Right.
Is on full usage. And I don't even know how to use the latest feature. I just shot with film cameras as long as I could, and I went to a Canon EOS 5D, which I think is a great camera still. And I never really updated it until it was starting to just not work anymore.
Right.
And then now I have the Leica M10 because it's a bit of nostalgia going back to that.
Sure.
And I never felt the Leica had good enough files until now.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
They had a beautiful, they always had the amazing cameras, and then things went digital and they were a bit behind.
Right.
And people, I considered buying a few of them, but just saw the files and I felt the Canon was just better.
Wow.
But I think that now the M9, and especially the M10, they've kind of caught up there, while making the most beautiful objects, which are very different to use.
Right.
They go better with a linen suit than a Canon 5D.
That's true. Is there a lens length that you're naturally drawn to?
When I use the Leica, I used to have 3 film Leicas, and I had a 28, 35, and a 50. And I never changed. I just took one of them, and that's what I used. Now I have an M10, and I use it with a 28.
Oh, nice.
It's the only lens I have. And I like it that way because that limits me.
Right.
I can move around, I'm mobile.
Right.
I'm not just sitting in one place. And the Canon, I've used a lot, which is a very versatile, the 2470.
Sure.
But the 50 I also use a lot. I like going out with the 50, and it's more difficult to do something dramatic with it because it's so brutally honest. It just is what it is.
It is.
Yeah. 28 is a bit cheating. You can you can sit in a cafe and you could sit in the corner here with a glass of wine, and just because of the Leica with the 28, it will already look a little bit more cinematic, a little bit more kind of storytelling.
It's really interesting you say that, especially there's a lot of cinematographers in Los Angeles who I'm lucky enough to be friends with and have interviewed, and they all love a 28.
Yeah.
Just because I think that is the more sort of the way a cinematographer sees, and it is more cinematic, to your point, in a way that it does something to the field of view.
Yes.
Yeah. You're a big Irving Penn fan as well.
Yes.
were there any other photographers early on that influenced you, or did you have a specific mentor?
No, I didn't have that, but I did have a great interest in magazines. And, you know, like any young people, you know, I went through the whole going abroad, buying all the kind of latest Dutch, Belgian anything that was out there, you know, sheet printed, something very like small circulation. But when I kind of matured a bit, I was more drawn to just the classic stuff, even American Vogue. Right. I really appreciated the last days of Irving Penn when he was still shooting for American Vogue, and he would still shoot the occasional portrait or a still life to go with a food article, which was usually written by Jeffrey Steingarten, who was a great food writer. Right. So I thought that was really, probably the most impressive, because if you see Irving Penn, you know him from his still lives and portraits. Fashion I was always less interested in, but he did it very well. But then he has done some incredible travel stories that have been much less published, that are definitely some of the best. Then you really see how good he was.
Wow.
Because, you know, he did some incredible travel stories, and you thought, wow. Of course, he was helped by the fact that, you know, like, it's very difficult now if you're in Sicily to find 100 women in black, you know, doing laundry, because now they would be like have a Heineken logo on the back of the but nevertheless, you know, so I don't have a lot of idols. Yeah. But he was a master.
I'm not familiar with too much of his travel work.
No, maybe it wasn't that much, but he did some, because when you look at all the books that have been published, both recently and before, they are very often a repetition of the same images.
Right.
You know, like there's like 60% the same, and then a little bit more of that, a bit different. Then you have, you know, he did the flowers and the still lives and all that. Right. But there's a whole other side to him. You know, any very good photographer, you know, catches the eye. Right. But maybe more, because we're talking about cinema. Maybe there's more frames in a movie that can be equally inspiring to a photographer than some other photography.
Mm-hmm. I mean, you're a big cinephile as well, right? Or not as much?
Yes. Less now. Maybe because, you know, I don't know if I have less time, or it's I think it happens when you grow older. My wife doesn't like me saying grow older because, you know, but it happens to everyone. And I'm a little bit less interested, because find myself more interested in real things. The guy sitting in a cafe, rather than the guy sitting in a cafe in a movie.
Totally.
But you know, if the movie's very good, it can be very good. It's nice for you to have something that's not 100% meat in the city of meat, because this is not really a Torino.
Right.
Maybe it's a good thing.
I needed a break from some annual latte, which I've been eating.
However, I think what's nice is actually to include the food. You know, there are these. I think it's fun, because I think people don't know about your audience, but I know that, you know, like that TV show, The Trip, you know, with Steve Coogan, where they're like talking all the time, but they still are like, the codfish, or you know the Financial Times always is like lunch with the FT. And it's a political interview, but they still say like what they had, and how much it cost. You know, like a glass of champagne.
Completely.
And it tells you a bit about people, like people who ordered like a cappuccino, and then like a egg white omelette. Right. When they could have had like lobster and champagne. They're retarded.
You can learn a lot about for sure. Oh, we went yesterday to, what's the other cafe that you recommended? It's sort of deeper past the train station.
Platti. Yeah, I saw pictures of that.
Yeah, we had champagne. That was nice.
Yeah, that's very nice.
Yeah, that was fun.
Did you have to go for lunch, or?
No, we just a champagne and a mini sandwich.
They have lunch too, and it's not the best lunch you'll ever have. Right. Because it's...
it didn't look great.
No, but it is still... But it's still fun. Yeah. You know, it's fun to go... And also the little sandwiches, and you can order from the kitchen like a tomato pasta. It's that kind of a place.
I love that. Yeah, no, I had a few of the little sandwiches.
Yeah, tramezzini.
Yeah. So good. Yeah, and then there was a table of businessmen next to us at 11:30 who just ordered a round of Negroni and Aperol Spritz. I'm like, I love this town. I belong here. So speaking of like food and stuff, I'd love to just ask you about how you work so closely with your wife Mimi on her cookbooks and the Manger blog and all that sort of stuff. How do you guys approach storytelling within a book? Because one of the things that I love about the cookbooks is that they are also storybooks, which I think really elevates them above a normal cookbook. And I'd love to know what your thought process is, or how you collaborate.
Type all that down and send it to our editor.
You can send them this.
True, I'll send them the link. Yes.
No, but yes, I will. I'm going to do transcriptions in the new year, so I will send this part and send it over. But I think that's what makes the book special. Honestly, it's.
Yes, but it's quite a interesting process to find the balance, because at the same, you have to think it's a cookbook,
right,
first and foremost. If it's a cookbook, it's a recipe book with photographs. It's not a photography book with recipes.
Right.
So I have to be mindful of that.
Right.
You can't get too egotistical. It means that you have only so much space for other photographs than the food, because if a book is 300 pages and there's 100 recipes, then 200 are gone for a recipe.
Right.
And then the photograph of the recipe, and even more, because sometimes the recipe is longer.
Right.
So, and then there's the text and all that. So actually now we're putting the final touches on the Italian cookbook that we've been working on for 2 years, which is very, very interesting. And we're actually at the stage now where we feel that the storytelling is suffering a little bit, and we feel we need to maybe cut a few recipes, even if it goes a little bit against the spirit of things, because I think when somebody gets a cookbook, whether it's 100 recipes or 90, it's not going to make all the difference. What makes the difference is it the cookbook that you want to buy?
Right.
Is it something that interests you? And some of the recipes that I still cook are recipes that I picked up myself, often, when I was living alone or later. Could be in a magazine, but it was usually linked to a story.
Right.
If you want to cook carbonara, you just Google carbonara. It will be a lot of versions of that.
Sure.
But it's about getting, I think, a carbonara with a story. And then also maybe with the validation that if you trust that author, that the carbonara will be good, as will all the other recipes.
For sure.
But they will also give you a little bit more than just the recipe. How many eggs.
Right.
It will be also how, a bit background maybe on the dish, or a personal kind of connection that the author has to the dish.
Yeah.
Yes. So it's about having space. We have no problem creating content,
right,
and we have no problems telling stories, but we have limited space in the cookbooks.
Right. Do you have any guidelines for what pictures you decide to include?
Well,
or maybe I'll ask it a different way. In terms of telling a story in one image, I feel like is a great skill to match what you're doing. Do you have a specific approach for that idea?
I don't know if there's an approach. It comes naturally. I think I see stories in everything, and Mimi is also like that. She's very kind of vivid imagination. So we're good together in that, for sure. Now we're about to have our primi. Do you have the Chardonnay from Liguria? No, from Puglia?
Sì, Salento.
Sì.
Okay, one glass?
Do it. When we shoot the book, we obviously have to shoot the recipe. So there's a kind of a grid that you have to follow, in the sense that there has to be a certain amount of recipes. So Mimi is more in charge of that, selecting what she wants to include in the book. I will have some suggestions, and most of those will not make it, because it's something she doesn't like. And those I really want, I will fight for. So that's one thing. When the recipe list is clear, she will. But that is also a work in process, because some of the recipes happen later. You could be traveling, she goes to a nice restaurant, and she gets intrigued by something, starts talking to the chef, or we're traveling and we meet some people, family. But mostly it's about nailing down the recipes and shooting the food. But then around it happens things. In this book, there is a for the moment. This process of kind of getting all the recipes together, and then what happens is, in this book, is we have these contributors. For instance, Consortio, the restaurant we went to on Saturday, they're sharing a recipe. So we shot a little bit more than just, we went there and Mimi was with them and they were cooking the recipe, and then we shot, of course, the recipe there, but also the guys were having lunch before we came, so we want to try to include as much as that material.
Right.
So, but we always have too much, so it becomes more a question of what not to have.
Yeah.
Then it's a bit of a tug of war, because then, of course, I will have my favorites, and I want that picture in, but sometimes those are not deemed, the most marketable stuff.
For sure.
No, but they're great to work with, Clarkson Potter, and they let us more or less have our way as long as it doesn't conflict too much with their way.
Right.
Try the wine.
For sure.
Tell your listeners how you like the wine. So Puglia is not very famous for wine in general, but I thought the Chardonnay is quite nice.
Oh yeah, that's really nice.
Very, very fitting with the food.
Yeah, no, lovely. No, obviously, food and wine is such a huge part of your life and aesthetic. What first drew you into exploring wine, other than, it's wine?
Well, that was that. Yeah. Done. But wine. No, it's a multi-layered
Right.
thing, really. But I was not into wine first because you can get drunk from it, which was unusual, I think. But it was just somehow not my character. But I was very interested in food and aesthetics. Moved out when I was about 20 to a little flat. Spent all my savings on laying some marble floors there, which my father thought was the stupidest idea. Well, it was the stupidest idea because I had no money left. But anyway, I started.
Oh wow,
This is delicious. I'll take a picture of that as well. This is what the food photography sounds like.
Exactly. You are now listening to Oddur photographing our delicious bowls of seafood pasta, and what is yours is a soup?
Yes, it's a seafood soup with little pastas inside. Look up here. Look a bit more handsome. a little bit more. Wow.
I've maxed out his hands in a second look. Wow, this looks incredible. I just love the fact that you laid marble floors in your parlor. I mean, that's incredible.
Yeah, but then I started cooking, and it was really, truly, maybe a little bit later, but it's kind of at the time when cooking shows became interesting for younger audience, like Naked Chef, Jamie Oliver, Nigella, and I was just there, like, I don't know, 24, 5 years old or whatever, cooking, a deconstructed pesto, I remember that recipe. Yeah. Does not include a food processor or a mortar. So that's very easy, just throw it in.
Yeah.
Anyway, and then you start selecting wine to go with the food. Iceland in those days had much more Italian wine available, and it was Italian recipes anyway. So that was my first love, Italian wine. And then I had friends and we'd meet and we'd do dinners and select wines to go with it. And then I moved to. No, always very into Italian wine. Mm-hmm. But when I moved to Paris in my 30s, I shifted naturally to French wine, and we drank a lot of Burgundy, living in Paris for 6 years. And we worked on a food guide of the city. So we were always going to restaurants. Yeah, it was never public, it was a project we had.
Oh, wow.
But it didn't actually come off, but it was a great experience. So we were in a new restaurant every day, in a new kitchen, interviewing a new chef, shooting food.
Oh my God! What?
Drinking new wine.
Do you think that'll ever see the light of day?
That was the pictures you saw that you were talking about
really?
earlier. That was from that. Yeah, no, it won't. It was just it was a great learning experience. And
incredible.
Then we moved to the countryside. We happened to move to wine country, Médoc, Bordeaux.
Right.
So that's what the next 8 years of my life were dedicated to drinking Bordeaux.
Right.
And that's what I realized, that Bordeaux wine is best drunk very old.
Right.
That's just how it is.
Right.
Which is why it's getting us some negativity now, because people feel it's very expensive and it's quite bold and tannic, but it's actually because it just has to be kept longer.
Right.
It's not ready.
Right.
Yeah. So, but that's a wine pointer. So it's been a process, just like anything else.
Yeah.
And now I'm living in Italy, and obviously in wine region, Piemonte, Barolo, famous wines.
Right.
So reuniting with my first love.
For sure.
And also I've been shooting a wine book in this past year. This is the sound of a dog trying to get pasta.
He's very successful.
How do you like yours?
Oh, it's fantastic. Do you want some?
No, I'm good. I've had it.
No, this is absolutely fantastic. How's that soup?
Amazing.
Looks
You should
good.
try that though. I'm sure you haven't had that. This is soup.
Wow.
Both of the dishes for your listeners are tomato based, lots of fish, and the soup can be eaten with a fork. That will give you a lot of information about the soup. It's sort of a pasta dish,
Right.
that they call a soup.
Yeah. So is your approach to this wine book different than you would shoot for one of Mimi's?
Yes, it is. We just a little bit coming back to the Heineken, T-shirts. If you'd shot a wine book in Italy 50 years ago, first of all, there would have been very different style of winemaking.
Right.
They weren't making wine in the same serious way as they're now. In those days, wine was more for the table, mostly. Of course, they had some wines in Tuscany and Piemonte, but that was a bit more serious. But it's been a revolution in Italian wine in the last, 20, 30 years. So now you have very serious winemakers, a lot of them young, who are making very beautiful wines and with a lot of different types of indigenous grapes specific to the region. However, they're not wearing as much tweed and wool and wool caps and mustaches as they used to, when they made the simpler wine. So the wine is better, but the photos are more tricky. And we decided to embrace that, and we decided to not try to fake it in any way. Like, so when I was describing this to someone. There's a book that might not end up in the book, but I submitted it to the wine book. Joe Campanale is the author. He has 2 restaurants in New York. Very good guy. And we decided to shoot it in such a way that there's a picture of tomatoes that have been plucked and they're being washed, and above, and there's like a decent kind of a sink, something, and a wall, and on the wall there's hanging a plastic kind of baby blue basin that I would always have removed if it was Mimi's book. We put a copper pot or just left it open.
For sure.
But we left it, even with the hose coming down, because we felt this should be a reality book.
Right. Of the now, of what's happening.
If somebody was wearing a Heineken t-shirt, that ask them to, take it off. Because it's not in the spirit of the thing. But that's the only thing I would do, So we're not asking people to go home and change and put on a white shirt and roll their sleeves. Or we're trying to keep it very...
Oh, that's really
trying to find kind of the essence. But in Mimi's book, I would... it is all very real as well, but I would be more mindful, because I can't choose the winemakers. I'm not choosing them. They're chosen for me. In Mimi's book, if we were visiting a place, we'd probably visit a more photogenic place.
Right.
This is how it is.
So at this point, do you have a favorite varietal?
Of grape? Yes. But not at this point, since I started drinking wine. Nebbiolo. That's the grape of Piemonte. That's what they put into all the best wines. You can't say that maybe. There are people who like other grapes, but the big wines of Piemonte are made out of Nebbiolo. Barbaresco, Barolo, these are Nebbiolo grapes, but they make very, very good wine from Nebbiolo also in Alto Piemonte, Upper Piemonte, which is north of Torino. They make very, very good in Valtellina, which is north of Lake Como in Lombardia. Right. So all the same grape, kind of very different expressions, but absolutely my favorite grape. Yeah. We play this game, everybody plays this game. If you'd go to a desert island, what wine would you take? And you can, water and coffee is a given, but you can take 3 types of wine, but you have to narrow it down a bit, not specifically down to producer, but the style and type of wine. So I usually say, I always say, champagne from a good vintage, maybe aged kind of 8 to 12 years, still fresh, but with a bit of maturity. Then about a 10-year-old Nebbiolo could be a really good Barolo from a good crew, from a good year, of course, 10, 12, not necessarily more. And then a 30-year-old plus Bordeaux from a great vintage. That's what I would take. Nice. Another person played this game, and she said she would take coffee, and I said, the coffee is already given, but she said, I like coffee so much, I'm still going to put that on the list. And then the other 2 entries were Sprite and beer. That was the worst entry we've had. But then, to each his own.
Let's say it's a Wednesday night. You're going to make something simple, maybe even just a little antipasti, cheese, some meat.
I never make anything simple.
Okay,
what are you talking about?
Let's say you're going to do it in an elaborate way.
I'm kidding.
Yeah, no. What's your favorite champagne? Just to, do you have a favorite producer, favorite bottle you could recommend?
Well, It's actually kind of a multi-layered question, because if I was making something simple, yes, you have to go back to thinking, when do you drink the good wines? Do you drink it on your birthday or on special occasions, or do you drink it when you make the best, finest food? There's a wine buyer who says he drinks the best wine with a simple food, so the wine can shine, and when he drinks really elaborate, special food, he drinks good wine, but not necessarily the one that requires most attention. That's one way to think.
Right.
I tend to go with the flow, like what I have, what I'm in the mood for, what I'm excited to try. I have a producer that I really like. There are many very good champagne producers, and actually, almost very few that are bad. I mean, champagne is just very good stuff,
right,
in general, and usually rather well made. But I have a fondness for Drapier, which is a champagne house that's kind of medium sized. They're very interesting, have very interesting bottles. We drink a lot of their Brut Nature, which is a zero dosage with a. And the one that has no sulfur added, that's a very interesting champagne.
Right.
I like Aigliurier, which is a great house. Ulysse Collin, another very good house. David Leclapart, another good house. But they're all very good.
Right.
If somebody gives me Cristal or Dom Pérignon, it's also very good. Boulanger is a very good. Out of the kind of classic houses, Boulanger is great. Paul Roger is a very good house with the Cuvée Winston Churchill.
Right.
From a good year, 99 is amazing.
Nice.
Expensive. Not maybe for that Wednesday night you were talking
right,
about.
but still, good to know. Good to know for the archives. So one of the other things I'd love to ask you about is you do a lot of the food and wine workshops, but you also do a photography workshop, which I have yet to do. But I'm super curious.
Yeah, I've seen from your work that you definitely haven't done it.
It's true. Need to get one on the books. But how do you think about approaching photography in terms of teaching it? Do you go by each individual, or do you have a broad sort of idea that's formed from teaching?
Well, I'm probably not a teacher of photography, but I think anybody can try to convey some information and like give helpful pointers. It could be in so many different shapes and forms. We always have classes or workshops that some people come for a workshop that's photography, but they don't even have any interest in photography because they just wanted to come on that day.
Right.
So that's one thing. But most people obviously are interested in photography, and they are very different levels. If you have people who are photographers, it could either be great or it become like a they also want to say what they know to the group, which is fine. It's absolutely fine, but often that gets very technical.
Sure.
But I try to just tell them what I feel. I don't feel like I'm there to. There's no promises. It's just, this is me. If you're here, you probably might like my photography or just want to meet my wife. I don't know. but we're here, and the best I can do is just try to, in a very honest way, tell them what I think could help them take better pictures.
Yeah.
And one lady, and I thought that was great. She had a good time. She was from Holland. She came. She said she had spent the whole winter every Tuesday going to photography class.
Wow.
And then with me for 3 days, she said she learned more in those 3 days because I taught her how to shoot manually.
Wow, incredible.
So that's one thing I always do. I just say, people are, a lot of people, even amateur photographers, people who love photography, they tend to rely too much on automatic. That sounds very amateurish probably to most photographers, but a lot of people do that. So just upping your game, I would say, one of the first things you have to do is take control from the gadget. You have to decide how the photograph is lit.
Right.
We could of course do some of that, a lot of that afterwards, but there's no, a camera will always, a computer will always look for the average light.
Sure.
They will try to make most of the things in the picture as clear as possible. That's their job.
Right.
Meanwhile, I always say people think there's too many variables, but there's only one, because you choose the ISO. If you're inside, you set it. Outside, you set it. You don't have to think about that again. Speed again, unless you're shooting, somebody running, or you can just set that as something comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
So you're just playing with the f-stop, and the f-stop really would have been difficult when you were shooting on film. You don't know what you're doing, but now you just look at the screen.
Right.
A bit darker, a bit lighter. So there is nothing to it.
Right.
But it gives you power to compose the picture rather than just document it, and then the later on you'll have to deal with it.
Right.
And I always say to people, I shoot very much in low light. I'm a sucker for low light.
Me too.
And that means that some of the picture will be not that evident, and that's fine. It doesn't have to be.
Right.
So it's about just having a bit of confidence to shoot the picture you want rather than the picture the camera wants or you think that you should take.
Right. No, I think that's a great piece of advice. Do you see any like common mistakes, or is there something that you've been able to teach that like really ups
Well, I
everyone's
think a
game?
lot of people wouldn't remove the Heineken t-shirt. I think that's a common mistake.
I do think that is so true. To approach a pretentious term from cinema, the mise en scène, for example, just like
But a little bit,
Yeah.
just a little bit of that. You need to be in charge
right.
and just get what you want because you're the storyteller.
Mm-hmm.
So that's definitely one thing.
I feel like you're really great at approaching and photographing people and getting the best out of them, whether it's a waiter coming to the table with a Negroni or a group of chefs.
That's because I'm tall. I'm intimidating.
So they're
That's
gonna do
another
what you-
helpful
right.
advice. No, but I mean, I don't like to start talking about something as if I'm teaching a Dale Carnegie seminar.
Right.
So I try to stay away from cliches. If I've said something once, I try to say something else the next time. But that's maybe is counterproductive because if you've said something good once to one group, maybe another group deserves to hear it.
Right.
And something I said once, at least twice maybe, is I think what I would like to do today with this group today, is to demystify and denormalize. So this sounds like a real line, like it went through like layers of an advertising agency before it was kind of proved. No, but so denormalize, demystify is what I was telling you earlier.
Right.
That there is no mystery to it. There is no like a lot of photographers today. They've suffered because the budgets are lower. There are many more good photographers out there because people have equipment.
Right.
50 years ago, you were a photographer if you just owned an expensive camera. Nobody else could take the picture.
Completely.
Now everybody can, so it's more competitive, and it's it has been demystified up to a point.
Right.
But people are still a little bit worried, and maybe they think that if somebody has some assistance and a bit of lights going on, maybe he's going to take a better picture. And that might sometimes be true. However, it's about demystifying, just thinking that anybody can take a good picture.
Yeah.
It's a bit like the ratatouille, the rat. Anybody can cook.
Cook
Like
a
anybody
ratatouille.
really, truly can take a good picture. And secondly, because it's not painting. I'm very bad at drawing. I could not draw a picture to save my life. But you need a certain kind of skill set for that.
Right.
But in photography, you could take a good picture without being a good photographer. So there's the element of luck. It's a
There
bit
is
like
that.
hunting. You could
Right.
actually just shoot like into a bush and you hear like a scream.
Right.
Hope it's the right sort of scream.
Exactly.
But in any case, that's yes. So that's removing that. But what I mean by denormalizing is that I always tell people, try to take pictures that do not look like your mother's Facebook page. Why would you go on holiday to Florence with your boyfriend and take pictures that you don't even want to look at when you come home?
Right.
You just take them, you're going through the motions. Nobody is, it's not photography.
Right.
It's just a documentation of something that, you already know you were in Florence.
Right. Right.
So why don't you try to take a picture that looks like it could have been in a magazine?
Right.
That's another thing I say too is, we're here in a restaurant. Let's say you're having a really good pasta dish, and you get inspired, and you are actually. You don't have to imagine. You're having a good
I'm
pasta
having a
dish.
delicious
Just
one.
eating it slowly because of the
Savoring
sound.
the taste.
So I'm gonna now take a spoon.
Yeah, please.
However, when you come home, if you decide to cook something similar, you will take inspiration from this. You will try your very best to cook something as close to this as you can.
Yes.
You won't come home and say, I'm going to just make a really bad pasta dish. Like I had a great pasta dish in Italy, and I'm going to come home and make something shit for my family because it makes no sense.
Right.
But people look at magazines and they say, well, that's a beautiful photograph. Wow, that's incredible. See the light, Danny Liebowitz, I can't believe. Then they take a picture of their family and they don't even try to go anywhere close to that. They just take a bad picture.
Right.
Because it's not implemented in them to give the best shot. So that's another thing I say, give your best shot. Effort, putting more effort into it will get you better result.
Right.
Regardless of any kind of talent or experience. And what I mean by denormalize is try to take a picture that has something foreign to it. You know, I tell the story of the 50 peaches, which is 1 peach is beautiful and 50 peaches are beautiful and 7 are not, never beautiful. And that's because, why is that? Because everybody has 7 peaches at home in a bowl. Nobody wants to see a picture of 7 peaches. 1 peach is minimalism.
Right.
You know, like you can cut it in with a knife, you see the pip in there, like maybe there's a leaf,
Yeah.
and it can be like on a plate, very kind of austere. 50 peaches is abundance. We did this TV show for Canal Plus, and I was not shooting it, styling anything, and so they did the purchasing, and the recipe said 3 peaches or 5 peaches, and she bought the producer bought that, and I said, don't realize when you're shooting Mimi, you want her to reach for a stack of peaches. That's dreamy. That's what makes people want to live in a farmhouse and cook this recipe, because it's the abundance. Because nobody buys 50 peaches, because nobody has enough people to eat 50
Right.
peaches. So you have to have the 50 peaches, or one. Same is, and this comes from graphic design as well. Like it's with the font size. The banal is kind of when there's too many font sizes on the page that are too comparable.
Right.
That's why, like, you know, like a huge capital letter, something big, something small, some contrast.
Right.
Yes. So basically, something you can't find at home. Yeah.
I love that idea. No, because I think it's something that's so simple that often goes overlooked. It's because of what is in the frame. It has less to do with the gear. It's
Yeah.
how what are you including or omitting from the frame? Do you have any specific approach to post processing?
Yeah. How does that work?
Or
Can you teach me? I have. Yes, I suppose I have. I try to shoot. I think, you know. Yes, you know. I shoot everything raw. That gives me a chance to correct my mistakes when I open the file in Photoshop. You know that. You know you could, you know, exposure. You know, correct a little bit of your things.
Sure.
You know, like highlights. And then I do very much the same thing to every picture. You know, like I correct the colors, maybe I up the contrast. When you up the contrast, the color goes up, so you have to saturate a little bit.
Yep.
Very little. Less and less.
Yeah.
Never any, I'm really very bad at, you know, luckily my wife is just beautiful, I don't have to do anything to her face. No, but, no, I'm not fond of, you know, post-production as in manipulating or, you know, like this is a good picture but the kid's better in that picture, so let's move the head from that picture.
Right.
That. Like I'm not very good at it actually, but it's also because I've never shown any interest in it. You know, I like, you know, I mean I will crop a little bit, but I never feel like every time I crop a picture I feel like Cartier-Bresson is like, you're such a loser.
Totally.
What are you doing? Can't you take a good picture?
Right.
No, so I mean, I would crop maybe if the image is a little bit skewered and you need to adjust it, then
Sure.
you need to crop a little bit. And I tend to maybe desaturate a little bit, but I think, I mean, you can't call things cheap tricks. People have styles, but when you have a filter or a way of producing an image that makes it looks like, you know, like you desaturate it so much that it becomes interesting because of that, you
Right.
know, it's
If you're leaning
nothing
on
wrong
that.
with it. Like people can just do whatever they want.
Sure.
You know, I just do minimal stuff.
I'm kind of the same way, mainly because I don't have the technical prowess and I hate being
Oh.
on a computer. It feels
I
weird.
think I would say that I would let's say you see, like, let's say you're sitting here and this is a corner table in a restaurant, dear listener, with a nice kind of texture in the back, and let's say you were sitting there having a glass of wine and looking out the window, And of course, what's behind you is going to be darker because the light's coming from where you're facing. Maybe when I'm taking the picture, I would like what's behind you to be even darker, but I can't make it happen because then you'll be too dark.
Right.
So I'll just shoot you like how you are. I know I can make what's already dark behind you even darker. That's a one stroke of the burn, or you select the area and you make it a bit darker. But it's more about enhancing what's already there.
Right. I think so. Yeah, completely. Do you always carry your camera with you?
No. Phone?
Yeah.
No, I usually don't because it's just such a. That's for practical reasons. I always have a dog. I carry my dog with me.
Right.
So when you have a dog here and some kids and stuff, possibly ancora due bicchieri di.
Sì, mi lasci 2 barracuda.
That's it.
Do you like Instagram, or do you sort of have a love-hate relationship with it?
No, I have no hate relationship, but I just don't feel.
That's good.
But I never feel obliged to post anything, or sometimes I find it a little bit, no, it's no problem because sometimes I don't go on Instagram for 3 days.
Right.
It's not something I feel very strongly attached to.
Yeah.
But then, but it is quite good. I enjoy some things. I enjoy get a good information. Enjoy seeing fun things other people are doing, or
Right.
You even enjoy all the nonsense.
Right.
Like the funniest is these kind of career influencers who are often women who have managed to get a certain amount of followers, and usually all the pictures are of them. And I understand if it's a fashion blog because they're actually showing out, but if they're just like in bikini, here, or drinking champagne, it's very odd. And you wonder who's following that.
Right.
And you wonder why I saw that. What does it say about me? No, but
why is this suggested to me?
Yeah, exactly. No, but you know what I mean. Like like that's very funny. It's funny to see how people use this medium to express whatever it is that they want to express. Like we use it. I mean, it is partially professional, I suppose, because a lot of what we do derives or is connected with that. But at the same time, we don't treat it like a professional tool either. Like we haven't done anything on Instagram, that's a disaster, we have to do. Like it's not like that.
Right.
We just, so it's a very much a mix of personal and professional.
Right.
And whenever we want, or have something to say, or
nice. I always love your weekly recaps after traveling or something with the wine book. It's
Yeah,
really
yeah.
cool to see. Yeah.
No, I like that too.
Only because it's like what really interested you in that week.
Yeah, exactly. Sometimes you feel like when people post too much, it's like, I think some people can post as much as they want, but it's what's specific to them. But I sometimes feel like it's nice not to post too much, and then you put what you think is interesting.
Right. So, just before our main seconde comes, one of the things I would love to ask you about is your writing style, which is so unique and so captivating and so...
Spelling mistakes, stuff like that.
No, but I don't know. It's just you and Mimi both are incredible writers. And is that something that you both work on, or is that just without self-censoring yourselves, or how does that sort of come out of you?
That I couldn't really explain.
Yeah.
No, but yes, English is not my first language, but I like writing in English more than Icelandic. Certainly couldn't write in French, but I can speak it. It would, if I wrote in French, it would be like a school essay of like a 12-year-old boy, no, 10-year-old boy.
Right.
No, but English, I like writing in English. You have a little idea, there's a story somewhere, and it kind of writes itself a bit.
Yeah.
Couldn't really explain. There's no technique.
Right.
And it's very quick. When I have a deadline, when I've written things for Condé Nast Traveler in the past, I usually have a deadline, and when that deadline is passed, I ask for more time, and they know me, so they give it.
Yeah.
And then when I really know I have no more where to go, I will kind of lock myself up and just do the damn thing very, very quickly.
Wow.
And it just happens very quickly.
So in a
but
way,
maybe I've been thinking about it a little bit before.
Right.
But when the actual writing is very quick.
there's a piece.
Mimi is not different. We're both kind of the kind of kids in school who would always delay everything until you have nowhere to go.
Right. There's a piece on the on Mimi's blog that I love that you wrote, I believe, about sitting in a little bistro, and it just starts. Imagine you're sitting in a bistro, a good one, and it's just this beautiful little piece. I'll link it in the show notes for people to read. But it's just this fantastic little snapshot, but a written snapshot, almost in the way that you photograph.
Yeah, that's maybe true. Like I suppose it's visual when I write, because I try to get in the elements like from the perspective of a photographer. Maybe
I think that's sort of it. For questions,
do you want to ask me about grooming? Why I always look so perfectly?
why do you always look so perfect? No, I mean, I could obviously.
Sartorial. I mean, I look fantastic.
I could continue on for sure.
I'm joking. You know, I think it's good. I think.
Do you think it's a good step? Yeah. I mean, the only last thing that I would maybe ask you, just for my own personal interest, is how do you think about approaching a space in terms of storytelling? Like, both of your properties are absolutely incredible.
Well, yes, that's quickly answered, because we both love spaces, houses. Always been very interested in, beautiful things, not necessarily expensive things. Mimi, you were with her at the market last Saturday, and she bought two very beautiful pieces, a kind of a bronze, copper, like a little baking tray or something with an artichoke on top. I think it was 30 euros, but you could also buy it for 600 euros if you went to the store.
Right.
And a little dog, kind of fox terrier door stopper.
I heard there was an unfortunate incident.
That my son broke immediately. but other than that, it was a very nice. You find things that have value to you, or other people have overlooked. So it's never about money or anything like that. But what's important is that you just have to. We try to create a space that we want to live in,
right?
And we want to live in a space because of our job, we are shooting in our homes. We want them to look the way they should so they could be shot.
Sure.
And we never want to be. I know food photographers who live in a minimalist space, and then they have one corner with what they call props, and they use words like props and food. We have no props or styling because it's just our house.
Right.
So if it's styling, then the whole life is styling. It's much more honest to just buy something you want to eat with, and if you shoot food, you shoot it on that.
For sure.
So, I mean, I think even if I wasn't taking any pictures, the house would still look like that. It's just about wanting to create something that is pleasing on the eye.
Absolutely.
It's nothing else.
Right.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you feel like you wanted to talk about, or that we missed, or that
cheers.
I'm not asking?
Let's just say cheers.
Cheers. Cheers, dear listener. I hope you are enjoying some champagne.
Yeah, I feel sorry for you after listening to this, and you should definitely get a drink if you didn't already.
Right. Maybe something stronger like a Negroni or maybe a martini or
whiskey,
something.
I think would be suitable.
Probably so.
Good whiskey.
Yeah. Can't go wrong. Thank you.
Thank you.